Hi guys, and it is the most wonderful time of the year. It's Victober again! Yay! So last year, the Victober month-long read-along in the month of October ended up being the most fun reading I had throughout the whole year by far. I loved it so much. And in case you don't know, Victober is a month-long read-along that myself and some other lovely ladies are hosting. Katie from Books and Things, Ange from Beyond the Pages, and this year we are really excited to add Lucy from Lucy the Reader to our group of lovely hostesses. And we are encouraging everyone over the course of that month to read all of the Victorian literature that you can fit in, all the Victorian literature that your heart desires. We just love Victorian literature. We are very enthusiastic about it, and I think it is some of the most fun and compelling and just rewarding literature that is out there. And I really just couldn't be more excited. I had so much fun, chatting with the other ladies about our plans, and we all had fun picking out our challenges, and I'm still tweaking my TBR. It has been so much exciting fun. So there are 5 challenges, and I think if you work things right, you could do as little as 3 short stories or books and meet all the challenges if you were trying to meet all of them. Because some of them you can double dip. We're not opposed to that at all. You don't have to read a separate work for each challenge if you can make it work for multiple ones. So without further ado, the challenges. And the first one is Katie of Books and Things fame. And her challenge is to read a Victorian book by a Scottish, Irish, or Welsh author. So I think there is so much out there about the Brontes or Charles Dickens or even like Rudyard Kipling or Thomas Hardy. But sometimes we can neglect those authors that are not British. So in order to kind of help that, Katie thought she would give this as a challenge, which I think is really great. So I will say Katie and I are planning on hosting during the month of October, and to go with Victober, a read-along of Miss Marjoribanks by Margaret Oliphant. She was a Scottish author and also Queen Victoria's favorite author. So this is supposed to be a really, really fun book. I think if you like Elizabeth Gaskell's Cranford, that you'll really enjoy this book. So what I've read of Margaret Oliphant is extremely fun. I think she's kind of like almost Victorian Shakespeare, just kind of comedy of errors and just so much fun. So yes, can't wait to do that. We will be doing an announcement video later with more information about that. Then the second challenge is Lucy's challenge, and she wants you to read a Victorian book that someone recommended to you. So whether it's by word of mouth or maybe a booktuber has, convinced you to pick up a certain book, I think this is a great challenge, maybe one that isn't talked about as much, but they find really, really awesome. So I think that's a great challenge, and I think, it can be a cool way, maybe the readers in your life, to ask them about the different Victorian books that they do like. Challenge number 3 is my challenge, and I thought in honor of the month of Halloween, I would have read a Victorian book with supernatural elements in it. Rather read a Victorian book or short story with supernatural elements. So I will give you some suggestions. And the first are by the Bronte sisters. I think if you haven't read much Victorian literature or classics in general, the Brontes can be a great place to start because a lot of them are first-person narration, and it's just extremely accessible. I hear a lot of people say, I didn't feel like I was reading a classic while I was reading it. So you get kind of all the reward from reading a classic, but not maybe as much of the effort. So the first one with supernatural elements is Wuthering Heights. This is by Emily Bronte, and this is a story within a story within a story. It's several people looking back on past events, and also along with the past events, kind of showing what's happening current day, the repercussions of the past events. This is, Katie from Books and Things has talked about this. This is not how Hollywood would like it to look, that it is a love story. This is not a love story. You're going to be repulsed if you go into this thinking it's a love story. It's a story of revenge and with real flesh and blood flawed and gritty and a lot of selfish, despicable people, but it is so engaging. And the writing, Emily Bronte's writing is just astounding. It's amazing. But I do think, though, this can be a hit or miss novel for people, but maybe, you know, more people go into it thinking it is a love story, so it kind of catches them off guard. But I do think maybe with the Brontes, this is not the best place to start. I think a great one to start with, though, and that also has supernatural elements, is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is the story of an orphan Jane, and she grows up in an all-girls school, and then eventually becomes a governess at Thornfield Hall, where Mr. Rochester is the master of the house, and he is just, she does not know what to make of him. He is a puzzle, and, you know, is he a decent man? Isn't he? And there are all these secrets in the house, and this is just so gothic. So if you're wanting something that's gothic with a little bit of supernatural here and there, I think this is a great one to go with. And just an incredibly fast-paced, edge-of-your-seat type story. And so, yes, one of my favorites. I really, really do love Jane Eyre, mostly for the character of Jane. I feel like she's one of my good friends. Next, I have as a suggestion for that, a novel called Phantasmion by an author called Sara Coleridge. This is an author I learned about in Shelley Dewey's book, Not Just Jane, which I actually wasn't wild about the book, but it did teach me about some authors I didn't know about. Now, Sara Coleridge isn't really a Victorian author. Phantasmion was her last book, and it came out in 1837, which is what some people say, you know, the first real year of the Victorian era. But since it did come out the first real year of the Victorian era, so she did live through, you know, the very beginning of it, I am counting it. What I think is really interesting about this book is that it's considered the first fantasy novel. And I just think it's really neat that maybe we should be giving credit where credit is due. You know, Tolkien is often credited with, you know, really bringing to life the fantasy genre. And I think maybe he popularized it, but I think maybe there are authors that we don't know about. So that's why I think this would be a really cool route. I'm really hoping to make time for this. Hopefully it will happen, but that could be an interesting one for people to read. The next one I have on the list are some short stories by Elizabeth Gaskell. Now, she doesn't really have supernatural elements in her full-length novels, but apparently her short stories, which I have yet to read, but I'm hoping to fix that, have some supernatural elements in them. So the three that I saw that have them were The Poor Clare, The Crooked Branch, and The Old Nurse's Story. I will, of course, list all of these down below so you don't just have to remember this. I think in these stories there either are supernatural elements or people think supernatural things are happening. So it's very interesting. It will be interesting to see that. And I just love, like I said before about her work, that it's all seems so different. Next is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I know he can be a hit or miss author for some people, so I don't think he'll be for everyone. I have not read any Henry James, but The Turn of the Screw does have supernatural elements, so if you wanted to try that out, that could be interesting. And then another author from Not Just Jane that I wanted to try out is Dinah Mullet-Craik. She wrote about 6 full-length novels and then several other short stories and other poetry and such. And this is called The Last House in C Street. And she just sounded like a really interesting author. She had a really cool story. She wasn't willing just to marry, just to have financial security. So she made her income by her pen, and then eventually did meet a wonderful man and fell in love with him. But ever since I read about her, I've been very intrigued. And so it'd be cool to read, get a little flavor of her writing by reading a short story by her. And then one author that I did not know at all, she had a short story with supernatural elements, and that is George Eliot. Her story is called The Lifted Veil. So I think it would be really interesting to read that because the novels that I've read of hers are incredibly realist. And so I think it's really neat that an author kind of branched out and had, this kind of writing in a short story format. Then another one, if you really want to go with the Halloween theme, there is of course Dracula by Bram Stoker. I know this can be very hit or miss for people, but then one that I knew less about, but Katie from Books and Things and Ange from Beyond the Pages, I think both really like this. It's Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. And it is about a lady vampire, which I think is really spectacular. Haven't read it. I do want to give it a try. We'll see if I get to it. Yes, but I hear great things, and so I think it's really cool that the same time Dracula came out, apparently Carmilla came out. And then two by Thomas Hardy are The Withered Arm and The Voice. So it sounds really intriguing that he also has some short stories. And then in addition to that, I found a website that has about 20 different kind of obscure authors, their short stories listed there, in addition to maybe, more well-known Victorian authors. One that really intrigued me is by Robert Louis Stevenson, and it's called The Body Snatcher. So I think that should be very interesting and perfect for Halloween time. Challenge number 4 is Ange's challenge, and this is to read a lesser-known Victorian book, books with under 12,000 ratings on Goodreads, and Ange, on her announcement video, will be giving you suggestions for that. And then the last challenge, our group challenge, is to read a Victorian book by a female author. I think a lot of times maybe the male authors can get some more of the attention, so I think it's great to go out of your way to try a female author, and maybe a well-known one like Elizabeth Gaskell or the Brontes, or a lesser-known one. You can do some research. I do have a couple suggestions for ones that I love by female authors, and the first is going to come as no surprise, and that is Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is just a lovely, lovely tale. You're given lots of everyday, seemingly mundane details, but then they kind of all add up, and you realize how real and flesh and blood these characters have become to you, and you're so sad when it's over. It's such a rewarding read. The next is Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. Just like the other Bronte books that I talked about, this is extremely accessible if you have not read much Victorian literature, and it's very short and sweet. It's around 200 pages, and it's the story of Agnes, who has a couple different jobs working as a governess for different families, and then also just the financial struggles her family is going through, and I think she's a very compelling character. And then the next one is Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. So if you're wanting a very challenging but incredibly rewarding read, I think George Eliot is a great author to go to. I've never heard anyone say Middlemarch or Daniel Deronda, they were incredibly easy to read. But I hear a lot of people say they were very rewarding to read. So I think these are books that you really do have to work to get through them, but the reward that you get is just so much from it. And so personally, my favorite out of Middlemarch and Daniel Deronda is Daniel Deronda, but I think that George Eliot is one author I most definitely intend to be rereading, and I think I'll gain more out of Middlemarch. Kind of the older I get, the more I reread it. And then lastly, just another plug for mine, Katie's Read Along. We will be hosting during Victober of Miss Marjoribanks by Margaret Oliphant. It's just supposed to be some good old-fashioned fun. So yes, those are all of the challenges. I can't tell you how much I look forward to seeing all of your videos. Please let me know, comment down below if you'll be participating. Like I said, I will be trying to post a lot on Instagram and Twitter because I am way excited about this. In fact, I'm sure I'll be blowing up Twitter about Victober. So yes, have a lovely day, guys, and I look forward to seeing you for another video soon. Bye.